we go. So good evening, everyone. Very much welcome to the lecture. We're very happy to have Sónia Alves here. Sónia, I know because she was the coordinator of the DASH project that we have been talking about already within this studio quite a lot about, and she did a really great job by bringing all the different partners together. She's actually the reason why we have Gayurp and Dom Social on board. So we could not be more grateful for that, Sónia. Apart from that really nice job that she did, she also is a very she has a lot of knowledge about housing, about urban planning, human geography, sociology, and so she has been doing a lot of research in interdisciplinary way. Here also urban governance, institutional change, and I think she has done also research on gentrification in Porto, and that is the reason why we reached out to her now for the studio for getting some input on this topic. And then what she proposed to us is to also really make that link between theory and practice, and I think that's what is also really nice to hear from her, to see how do you look at a specific situation and what's happening there, but then also link it to different theories. And Sónia, I'm really happy to have you here. I think I will hand over to you. And then if I forgot anything, you can say it as well.
Thank you very much, Els. Thank you everybody for inviting me. It's really an honor to be here with you. And I really hope that my talk is of a small use for your work as a researcher, as an observador. How do you say that? Someone that looks at things and try to make sense, analyze things. And of course, I'm talking now to the students directly that have this, I guess, less experience, and it's always more challenging to them to make sense of the different contexts they analyze and all of that. So if you agree, I would share my PowerPoint. How should I do this again? There it is. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So when you invited me, I thought, what should I talk about and how? Then I realized, well, I'm not based, I'm based in the south of Portugal, in Évora actually, and I've done comparative international research on other cities like Copenhagen, just to give an example, London, in the context of other international comparative projects that I had. But I did my PhD in Porto in sociology. Well, and I actually changed to Lisbon University. I started in Porto, but then I changed to Lisbon. But the master was definitely in Porto, and I did my bachelor's in geography in Porto. I finished in 1997, and I'm not from Porto, and I moved as a student, and it was really not like Engels going to Manchester, but a bit discovering the different housing conditions of the people in a very old historical center. It was really interesting for me. I was coming from a middle-sized city near Spain, completely different structure, a bit different. So when I thought how to prepare this talk, I thought that I could look back, not directly to my publication. I've had several with different aims. For example, that you just mentioned about gentrification. I looked at statistical data. I wanted to test if there was a gentrification with people or without people, more commercial, just to give you an example. And I had other papers that compared the situation in Lisbon and Porto, more cooperative analysis of some agencies that were working on regeneration. So I have had published, I also looked, for example, at one operation, Cardosas, that I will also mention here. I also looked at regeneration of the private large-scale housing estates that I'm not going to mention, suburban areas. I looked at, well, I'm going to mention some of them, but the point is, how can I make sense of these snapshots of research that I developed over time? And I think it's a bit this that I'm doing here. Let me see if I can, how can I, oh, wow. And another thing I think it's important that we have some analytical framework that help us to navigate, to help us to guide our narratives about it, and interpretations about the context. So that's why I decided to bring this conceptual framework that is more or less new for me. It's André Sorensen. He's a researcher based in Canada. I never met him, but I found some of his papers on spatial planning very interested. And what I try to do here is use this conceptual framework to look at regeneration. And he contributes to historical institutionalism literature. The name tells us what we are talking about. It's some historical approach to things, the long view of changes, transformation, and it's about institutions. I will tell you how scholars describe institutions. And I will try to explain why institutions matter for urban regeneration. I'm a geographer interested in urban governance, as Els said. I've been more now looking at housing policy more specifically. And you will see also this concern about the different phases in terms of housing goals, means, and outcomes. And I particularly like ex post evaluation in the sense that you can look back what were the aims and what instruments they used and the results. I think we can learn a lot doing this. Why Porto as a case study? Because you were there and you are now also experts and we can discuss this. We will look at the historical institutionalism key concepts, like of path dependency, just to give you critical junctures. We will, using Sorensen, we will pay attention to the order and sequence that events happen because they matter. And these mechanisms that seems to have an effect, mechanisms of, we will see, but for example, we can call it a mechanism of construction, regeneration, but can be attracting funding, can be, well, some actions that lead to certain results. Lately, I've also used to this process tracing approach. I've compared Italy housing policy with the Portuguese housing policy, looking at this, what happened over time, identifying critical junctures and see what external factors. So I've been very much, even in Dash, we were talking about this. I'm really interested in the stories, the long view. And this is super interesting when you, for example, compare Serbia, a country that had such a solid housing sector, and then due to a war, due to some political instability, they totally privatized, like many other ex-socialist countries, their housing stock. This is super interesting to understand also how these narratives of privatization and blah blah affects. And well, we will talk a bit of everything in this presentation eventually. Let me see. Okay. So we are looking at urban regeneration. This is our interest in this paper. And in fact, urban regeneration should be a permanent challenge and a citywide challenge, even though, as you can see in many cities, sometimes it appears as urban projects or focus on waterfronts or large social housing estates. So the problems that should be tackled and how they are tackled, all of this is subject to some interpretation, etc. Urban policies evolve over time, we know that, and they reflect shifting economic conditions, historical conditions, also the conditions of the housing stock, as we will see in the case of Porto, etc. Critical junctures are moments of change. It's something that happens that change what was going on before. These are periods when goals, instruments, ways of seeing things, problems, they change, and actors propose different solutions. And the results of these changes, and also the path dependency, the outcomes that come from other phases, this is basically what we have today in the city, and we can analyze it. Let me see. Change. Sorry, I don't know what's in here. So historical institutionalism, the word institution is there, but what are we talking when we talk about institutions? Typically, for people from spatial planning, eventually, institutions, we think about probably organizations. Do we think about governance institutions that formulate policies, that implement them, different departments? Are we thinking about that? Some lawyers probably will think about institutions as the institution of property or the institution of, they will think about, for example, inclusionary housing zoning mechanisms or instruments can be seen as institutions that we compare across countries over time. Some people say also families are institutions. I mean, it's normative understanding of certain things we want to study at the end of the day, because it can be ideas, it can be many things. Each structure what actors perceive as legitimate problems, feasible policy options, and desirable outcomes. So when we think, for example, we have since 2019 a law of housing that defines who is responsible for providing housing. If in Portugal, housing is a right, to the access to housing is a right to have to all the family, theoretical in the constitution. And these laws define who is responsible for these. You will see more examples through this study. Historic institutionalism provides a powerful analytical foundation for understanding how systems evolve over long periods and how these legados, the legacy of institutional arrangements and policies, shape what we have today, and also how we can imagine the future. Historical institutionalism conceives institutions not as simple formal structures, but historically sedimented configuration of rules, norms, etc. See more examples. This is it. The idea is also that when you talk about institutions as laws, institutions as agencies, institutions as the rights of tenants or landlords, institutions as this and that, what you are talking about structures that somehow limit what is possible and not is possible. They create some dependency over time. So what you can do, it depends on the law. I remember when I was doing interviews in London, Copenhagen, and Lisbon about, are you using mechanisms to secure affordable housing? And they were telling me, you cannot do this. It's in the law, but it's not in our plans, for example, in Lisbon. Or in Lisbon, they were saying, yeah, we are using since the 90s. It's a Section 106, and we can secure percentage of social housing. So this was clearly different institutions that create what local authorities can do or not do when they do the licensing of new projects, etc. Most of the times, things don't change much because of this path dependency, because institutions tend to persist. Most of the times, that's what happens, but it's not always the case. We will see that. So we will look at Porto because, well, I've looked at Porto for many decades. Also, there's a lot of literature, and we can test, we can apply the value of this Sorensen analytical framework to see how things have changed, how you can see continuity in ways of intervening in the city. You can see moments of ruptura and why, and you can see institutional reconfigurations, all of this, I think. So this sociologist in the 80s, he was writing this, that we should not only look at the present, we should not be in this retreat of present, but we should try to explain the structure and the direction of long-term social process. We should try to interpret these, where societies are going, how have they changed, what have we learned from the past. That's why I think the past is so interesting. There are several competing theories that explain continuity change. I'm not going through details, but more from political science. You have this punctuated equilibrium theory that say most of the time change doesn't happen. You have equilibrium, and sometimes you have some big shocks. It can come from a war, it can come from a global financial crisis. Usually they say external exogenous factors. Then you have others that looking at certain realities, they say, no, there's transformation. Even the laws are the same, they change a bit, this and that, reinterpretation of small things, and changes always happen. And we should take care of, should look at and recognize these changes. And then basically it's this. You can use the process tracing like with a chronogramma, put the main critical junctures based on certain criteria, and then to compare and then to see which explanation fits better to the reality you are studying. You can use real cases like Porto to see whether path dependence explains continuity, whether you see big exogenous shocks, typical, for example, when we need Troika help, we need international help, we are in big trouble, and then you have to change some policies, you have to, this is moments of change, much debated in the country. Identify critical junctures is really important. And this, Andrés Sorensen, yes, we have this, and we have an explanation here. Let's look first at this. So what he says, we should understand change by looking to antecedent conditions. And I'm sorry for my English, but and for permissive conditions. Well, it's basically these questions: when and why windows of opportunity merged. And I will give examples after. And what was really the change? What was really why we call it critical juncture at a certain point? What changed? Oh, I'm sorry, it was behind. What choice were made at this moment? Which alternatives they had, what path they follow. There were a lot of conflicts. And then the productive conditions, because how change was possible? Was it funding? Was it some legal changes? What it was? And then this is very much, I don't know if you have read Kuhn, Paradigmatic Revolution of Understanding and Knowledge. It's like you have a paradigm of understanding and the ways of research, and then there's a revolution, and it's not the sun that goes around the earth, it's the earth that, and then we change the way of seeing. It's very much about these paradigmatic changes. But it's important to understand these circumstances that make change possible. And these productive conditions are related to the choices that come after the window is open for the cat to come, to enter in the room. Okay. It's also interesting to see now talking about institutions as layers, that laws can be formulated very fast sometimes, but some administration continues doing the same and understanding the same. So you can actually come with new policies, even sometimes funding, but then you have problems in terms of implementation. And there's a big mismatch between what they said it would happen and what happened in reality. This is really interesting also to understand. And also, sometimes you are already in some, it's very funny this, sometimes you have already an agency that wants to, that says it's going to do something completely different, but meanwhile you have the product of the previous agency, and you have the outcomes that come, or they are working on that you will see some of this. Well, I already talked about periodization as methods for identifying successive phase, for example, of urban regeneration, but could be housing policy, for example. Mass production after Second World War, could be after some time of privatization, so talking about right to buy, if it was housing policy. It's not the case, it's more urban regeneration here, but just to give you an example. Okay, I think I've said this already. So how can we jump from theory to Porto? How can we apply this Sorensen model to Porto? And this is just an example. So I identified 5 regeneration regimes. And I identify these by looking, I will come back, by looking at official publications. So the first one, it will be exactly this one. Since the mid-70s, after immediately of revolution, with community mobilization, we had a Secretary of State that was actually my professor at that time. I'm very old, so because I'm 52, so I have 30 years of sometimes teachers, sometimes colleagues, older people that were telling the story of the 50 years and how they create the SAL, the time of revolution. You had to have architects that help communities to rehabilitate their houses. How can we transform informal housings without water in something different? This was time of mobilization in Portugal. After 50 years of Salazar, it was big inequalities. This was something. So, and then at that time, there was a Nuno Portes, who was the Secretary of State. He was in Lisbon at the government. And if you see this CRUARB, it's Comissariado para a Reabilitação Urbana da área de Ribeiro e Barredo. So it's, let's call it an agency to rehabilitate a specific area of Porto. And I can show it immediately. It's this area, waterfront. But it was not like that waterfront Belgrado, with the, you will visit Serbia, those who have not. It's not waterfront rehabilitation with Arabian funds. It was not for investors. No, it was for the poor people, working class, who were living there, working with the worst conditions. This was the spirit at that time. I'm not sure today you can find dead people there. This is another thing, because many were transformed in short rental in hotels and things like that. But that's another thing about if that stock stays in permanent public housing or not. All of that management is also important. Okay, but if you look at this chronogramma, how to say it, you see 74, 82, you see some money coming from the government. So this was a urban pilot, an experiment to see how they could do expropriation and then rehabilitation and then rehousing in situ. But then that experiment finished in the 80s, and then you will see what happened. The Cruarb that only had a limited area to transform, then it becomes a municipal agency with more responsibilities for a bigger area and keeping a bit the same methodology. You will see the state of Porto. It was very derelict, the historical part at the time. Let me just see. So basically, Cruarb, it will stay 25 years working in the historical center. They will get this money from the government beginning. After, it's only local and they don't have much money. And what they will try to do is to buy housing, expropriate housing. Many times the owners were just happy to sell them because they were so derelicted, and they even have tenants with very low rents, to create that stock of housing where they would rehouse the tenants. They also apply for EU money in the 90s, and they had money in the 90s to work. The more they say, you will see a bit. So what were the antecedents to this Cruarb agency and approach? It was the revolution, it was the housing crisis, it was the minister support, it was also the support of architects from Porto School, all of them left-wing, probably most of them left-wing, and they were very much trying to work with communities, for communities. This was very much in their DNA at that time, very sensitive. They, in the 90s, as you know, in many countries, developed countries like Denmark, Germany, etc., the solution for this derelict area was seen as just demolish and build new, but they somehow knew the power of rehabilitation, of keeping identity, of keeping the story, and it was very well seen. I can tell you that, for example, in Évora we had, I was studying also Évora from other reasons, we had Etienne de Groer. It was also urbanist and planner that very much influenced and showed the importance of Évora keeping that beauty that today is UNESCO Património, and brings tourism and brings some proud to the communities. And there was some, I don't remember the name of the architect, that says, no way, we are not going to destroy this, we keep everything, we will be rehabilitated this. This was super important. Also, we didn't have the money. There were projects in the past to also to demolish and to build, but it was good. They were not they were not implemented. Sometimes it's good when things are not implemented. Okay, so first area, it was this Ribeira Barrido area in front of you. Cruarb's original mandate, as I told you, it was state-led expropriation, rehabilitation, and social rehousing. Across the 80s and 20s, successive reforms expanded the institutional perimeter, extending generation responsibilities to additional area, all the historical center, but the funding was going down and they didn't have much possibility. They were rehabilitating not many per year. And even those who work there, somehow they felt that another type of model had to be added to this. So I don't know if you visit SE neighborhoods. Oh, you did? Oh, super. I studied SE for my thesis. SE has been an object of many phases of rehabilitation. If you remember, it's difficult to get there. Accessibility are very difficult. I don't know if you found manifestations of drug consumption, traffic, and all of that. They have struggled a lot with this in this area. Well, what I should tell you is that the religion was a bit distributed all around the historical center. So you can see, if you look at D, C area, you see many reds, means that buildings are in very bad state. You have ruins, decay, complete in ruined buildings. So what Cruard started doing, it was this is very important in a city, to see the conditions of all the buildings, or the cadastro, I don't know how to say, who owns the building, what is the condition, and try to see how can we solve this. Sometimes they decided to buy, and others they try to tell them the incentives that the private landlords could have. There were some national programs. I'm not going to talk now, like Recria. I have a paper on Recria only. It was money to rehabilitate houses that had old contracts, and the state would give a percentage as long as after renovation they kept limited rents. Well, and in the 90s, Cruarb applied for money, like we did in Dash. We applied for funding so that we could travel, we could learn, and they applied for funding to renovate more of the set. At that time, and as you know, only recently, money can be, European Union money can be put in renovating buildings and renovating social housing state. In the 90s, that was not possible. The only thing they could do is they could renovate buildings and then create public equipments, like a library, like something for old people, like these kind of things. But they could not give bathrooms, better bathrooms to people. They could not, they could do like fachadismo, they could clean everything, but they could not improve housing conditions, really. So that should come from national money and local money. This is a very shocking picture that you see how this area was a no-go area, but where people were living. You can see people were living in the second floor, third floor. You see all the clothes outside, probably with kids, many kids, and many families. Sometimes there was overcrowding. And then you had this traffic. This was working in the supermarket of drugs in Porto at the time. And everybody knew that. No one was cleaning it. There was no police. It was like, I don't know how to describe this. And then suddenly things start changing. Let me see. I thought I had more pictures of this time. I think I have after. I should say that Cruarb got money to do the physical stuff for Morro da Sé. I don't have many pictures, seems. But also there was poverty tree, and there was some Porto municipality apply for money from to do the social part of it, to work with the vulnerable families, with old people living in very bad conditions, and this brought some money to work with the poor. So you had two institutions working together and cooperating, and in this area-based perspective. There were stories of people that were going to the beach. They didn't have money to go into the beach so close. Old people that they didn't have enough money, and they create some place where there will be, for example, training for unemployed people, the high percentage of the area, very high percentage, high rates of unemployment. So people would, women, for example, would learn certain, would be organized, would be working, making food, giving food, doing, I don't know the name now, but sorry, my English now, it's not helping me. But there was this physical and social approach to the neighborhood. This is important. But in the early 20s, Kruar was widely seen as a slow and resource-constrained agency to deliver the large-scale transformation that was needed to the historical center. And the national government created these possibilities of creating agencies, and the Porto municipality decided to finish with Kruarbe and to create a new approach. I have to say that many people that work in Kruarbe start working in the new agency. I know some of them that could tell me the story about the two institutions. So it's not that they were all fired and that something completely different appeared. No, but this new approach, the through Sociedade de Reabilitação Urbana approach, wanted to have a more market-oriented regeneration model, but they also would keep some of the vulnerable areas like Morro da Sé to rehouse people. To those areas were more difficult for the market to enter, so let's keep it, let's improve it, and let's put people there, which also didn't help the social mix that we would like to see in all the city, and did not tackle the inequality that you can see. I took this picture from a presentation from someone from SRU that is not the director. I was recently interviewing her, by the way, and she presented this in some public presentation. And the idea here is this SRU gets the power of doing the, how do you say licenciamento in English, else?
Giving the permits?
Yeah, permits of construction, of rehabilitation. They had the power to do this, to give the permits that were entering. So they were, let's call it, a municipality inside the city, an agency with the power of licensing, expropriation, rehabilitating. They facilitate the transformation of the relicted housing stock in hotels, in restaurants, in buildings where you can only find one-bedroom apartment that were easily transformed in a short rental. They did all of that. They wanted to change the city, the historical center. They wanted investment. It's also important to see that in 2008, there was the global financial crisis, and it was really difficult. In 2011, we also had to ask international help. So there was no money to keep, and there was this problem. Imagine Cruar, or the city of Porto, they had housing that was not rehabilitated. That was not, the machine of rehabilitation stopped. And there was this paradox. How are there public, how the municipality has housing and it's just relicted. So the city was also in this difficult situation. You can see the transformation of certain areas. Probably you visit this area of Largo de Pena Ventosa, where they rehabilitated this and they rehoused the people that used to live there. So this was completely for the people. I don't know if they sold, they initiate a right to buy policy like in England. I don't know the date. It's not clear what they have, what it's in the market, these kind of things, I don't know. But what was obvious is that the SRU adopted a segmented strategy, dividing the historical center in areas attractive for market investment and in other areas for vulnerable population and rehabilitation. And many of them, of that population, was going to the peripheries, to rehousing in those areas, and they will never come back to the city. 2011 was basically the policy was a fiscal policy of incentives for rehabilitation. Then we have the golden visa. Come to Portugal, invest in Portugal, and we will give you a passport. We give you basically whatever you want. This was very much the approach, and with the big funding mechanisms. But it was also interesting, they very much SRU had this narrative, we can attract money for each, I don't know, 20 euros that we spend, 10 or 11 times more are spent by the private investors. But the thing is that at the end, and you have a lot of teasers and show this, at the end the transformation was expropriation to transform old housing in luxury hotels, like in the Cardosas, if you visit it, to reduce traditional activities. And sometimes with very bad negotiations between public and private, in which the private will never lose money and the public will lose money, and even create problems between the agent, the owners of the SRU, which was the state and the local authority. Here, an example of a transformation of these Cardosas. This is clearly habitação housing for those who can pay a lot, and most of that housing was sold for second house. Even the strategic, the programa or document for the neighborhood said, oh, this is near Estação de São Bento, the station, and it's many people from other parts of the country, maybe they want to buy a second house here, it will be wonderful. And even saying that, they justify that parking space for 300 I don't remember, very big parking space, it was very expensive. Then they expropriated a lot, then this goes to judicial things, and then at the end we are talking about 7 million of deficit in this Cardosas operation. Then, but now I want to tell you something different. This SRU, because meanwhile we had COVID, we have this resilient program that comes, next generation funding coming from the European Commission, and SRU could access to money again to tackle very poor housing conditions, and they have used it with some success. Also, Dom Social. I don't know if you visit Dom Social investments with PRR funding, but also SRU. And now I'm going to show you what everybody considers is a very good example. You have these ilhas, islands of back housing with very poor conditions, back-to-back workers' housing that is typical from the 19th, 20th century, with the characterized by overcrowding, humidity, poor sanitation. In 2015, Porto had 957 islands, 8,000 dwellings, 4,000 families living in these places. And with this operation, that is Bairro da Lomba, they use EU money, 100% funded by EU, to the demolition of 3 islands. Now you understand what are ilhas, to build 47 new dwellings. to bring 40 families that lived all their lives in very poor conditions. And this is the result. I took the picture, but the picture is not so good because maybe you cannot. This is the result. And there is connection in between the islands and keeps the connection. You can enter one island and go and live through, keeps the topography, keeps the sense of identity, and families will be very happy. I have more pictures, but I didn't include them. So what we have here is through using money for those who need more. And the question is, are they going to keep this approach? Will they see these as their clients, or are going to keep the destination of rehabilitation that we saw in previous regimes? So, to finishing, today I try to use this Sorensen, that analytical framework, to try to see the long-term urban transformation of Porto, identify 5 decades of regeneration, having in mind very much the agencies, the objectives of the agency, the targets of the rehabilitation, and the outcomes. The question is, are we now seeing a social turn? Well, we could develop a lot here, but I guess we don't have time. Porto demonstrates that regeneration outcomes are also never accidental. They emerge from long sequence of decisions. Through was working with Mordacé, through work with Ilhas. Uruguay was the first one doing that beautiful island rehabilitation. I don't know if you visited, but this is a good example that we replicate now and we can replicate in the future. We don't know which model will guide the new generation. We don't know, maybe we know, but I don't know. What's really, which factors are really important for what it comes, and in the institutions. And I would like to know your opinion about what you think will be good anti-gentrification tools to strengthen social mix in the city, to restrict spatial inequalities between Morro da Sé and Cardosas, or Mozinho da Silveira that goes to the station. And basically that's what I wanted to tell you. I don't have anything more for now to tell you.
Thank you so much, Sonia. That was really interesting to hear all the things that you had to say. Let's see, from the students, maybe I would like to invite you for some questions. As we have been doing, please, it would be nice if you could turn on your cameras and also introduce yourself before asking the questions. You can either just start talking or raise your hand. I can get to the participant list if anyone raises their hand. Who would like to start? See it. I can see you have the question brewing there.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sonia, for this very insightful lecture, and also for ending with these extremely relevant questions concerning the future cycle of transformation for Porto. These are also questions that we've been touching upon our conversations. And I just have a few follow-up questions on you. You mentioned in the beginning that during this first phase of urban regeneration, the municipality became a really active stakeholder, being engaged also in acquiring land through, for example, expropriations, through relocations. Then there was this shift towards a market-oriented approach. Now with a social turn, is there an attempt for the municipality to again enter into this acquiring of land, taking up a more active role, or what are the options? We've seen so many vacant buildings, but there seems to be a lack of strategies to activate these buildings. What is your opinion on this?
Very interesting questions. Thank you very much. Yes, the first phase of urban regeneration, it was really based on I don't know the word. Maybe you can help me else. Vistorias. So some tenants would complain about housing conditions, would say, well, this can collapse anytime. And then they will send a notification to the landlord, you have to improve. If you do that, either you have to sell or we will expropriate. And many landlords, they were very happy to sell because the situation was so bad. And that present conditions, it's in itself interesting how the historical center arrived to that situation. And it's clearly, if you like spatial planning, it's really about the models you allow as a city, how you see housing stock, if you really oblige the landlord to keep the housing in a good state or not. And if you don't do that, why you don't do that? And there was a lot of here, it was the result of rent regulation for decades and decades, differently from other countries that in the 80s and 90s, they include housing allowance to the tenants who could not pay. And in case landlord would do renovations to update the values, that was not the case. They kept landlords as social security, freezing the rents, because in the 70s, imagine when there was the revolution, what they did again, it was to frozen all the rents, to freeze again, instead of doing something. So there was no way landlord could, even they wanted to keep the houses in a good state. So that just, and what it follows, you can imagine, is very permissive land policy, suburbanization, and all of that. And the fact that we have this legado of bad policies also explains that we don't have really fiscal policy to say, if you have a property, either you sell it or you have to pay a lot to keep it vacant. It's totally the contrary. If you have a very old housing or building, then because it's very old, you almost don't pay anything. Even the market price are very high. So there's no policy tools to work this issue very well. And because most of the families, they are landlords, it's very difficult for governments to create policies against landlords and owners of housing. So we have really a problem with fiscal policy. That's
When
why
you say it's very difficult, sorry to interrupt, Sonia. When you say it's very difficult, is that because it's difficult politically or difficult more from a practical standpoint?
it's political, and it's because we are not, our policies are not guided by evidence policy. Our policies are many times a joke. Yes, because we have all the institutions, the legal institutions to do that. Municipalities can create zonas de pressão urbanística, some areas where prices are very high, and they say in these areas everything that is vacant will be the IMI, the imposto municipal, means the how do you call it? The taxes, the council tax can be aggravated a lot, and you should notify the owner after 2 years that is vacant, 2 years, and then he can say, oh, I'm going to, he can do something about it or not. But even if it doesn't, because the value, the fiscal, it's so low, 10 times more, it's not a lot. So we have this problem, and well, I can tell you that right now I'm starting a project on vacant housing with the Coimbra University, actually. The name is exactly vacant housing. And what we are doing, we are going to compare municipal policy using these plans, zonas de expressão urbanística, and to see what was on the ground, the practice. Municipalities that send the letters, that increase, they don't increase, they identify the housing that's vacant, that don't have any consumption of water and electricity. They send it to the fiscal service that should increase. And how that happened, if there was that brought actually housing to the market, because we hope that there are good examples at the municipal level. I bet something has to happen. If they use the fiscal incentives, something has to happen. If we had also in the law, it was not in the law, I'm sorry. We had a Mais Habitação program, package of policies, that one of the things is arrendamento coercivo, means coercive rental. If you want, if you keep it vacant, then I go, like there is in Tübingen, for example, I send you a letter. If you don't rent it immediately, then we will rent it for you. And sometimes the only fact that the instruments exist, it's enough to avoid bad practice. But then the new government came with a different orientation and understanding. It just finished that and allow again short rental. And well, regarding optimist things, we have in Plano Diretor Municipal, in our municipal plan of Porto, we have inclusionary housing zoning, but just focus in the historical center, which really I don't understand. Why, if there is, for example, in case of densification, change of use, why they could not use to all the city, all the municipality, where obviously there are housing problems, and they could ask a certain percentage of social and affordable housing. But that exists in the new municipal plan. Let's see the practice. That is always a problem, really. Okay, I think I somehow, I don't know if I answered to your question.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry,
Other questions? Yes.
just want to ask the name of the project you're working on again for the vacant housing.
It's called vacant housing, I think. I know it's in Portuguese. We don't have a website yet. The contract it's not signed. It starts now. It's 6 months project of research funded by PR for EU money that is also allocated. So we applied to this research, more applied research, and we got it 6 months. We have people from Law University in Coimbra, actually. So they will analyze how this changed the conceptualization of the problems, the tools that exist in law. We have fiscal lawyers, expert on fiscal policy, also, urbanization and this kind of more regimes of urban regeneration and things like that. And we have Nuno Travasso. I think you met him, right, Els? Nuno Travasso is the PI. He's an architect and urbanist. I am the co-PI. And we have also Alda, who, for example, just to give an example, she's a statistical person with also people from also architecture that work with maps. We will do the mapping of all the vacant housing at different levels with details to see opportunities of intervention. We will try to understand the different typologies of problems, because you have vacant housing in low demand areas, like in many other countries, and Germany also has this past in the eastern part that from areas of rural exodus, for example, where you have this vacancy, and you have areas of high demand where you have this vacancy, and we will try to see who are the owners, for how long it has been, why is it vacant, if it's the good conditions, bad conditions, what type of tools this require. I bet it will be really interesting. And I will be also doing international comparative analysis. So maybe I will call you,
Yeah, that would be great.
the German colleagues, to see what's going on there, what we can do. So this is really could be interesting. Have I answered your question, Lucy?
Oh, yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Such a pity I cannot see your beautiful faces.
Maybe they already changed into their pajamas.
I don't think so.
We did see
Pajamas
Greta
are
Iona and
totally
Caroline
fine.
before.
No problem with pajamas.
Yes.
Svenja, if I may ask, but I see a hand up from who is
Farah.
it? Farah. Maybe I'll let Farah
No.
ask first.
Somebody else.
Farah, you're still on mute, sorry. Yes.
And
Okay.
see you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So
Farah.
thank you. So our project is more focused into Grigio in Villanova de Gaia. And actually, yeah. So when we went there, we saw some housing development happening there, and it looks like the people are moving more into this neighborhood. My question is more into, is there any law or something in the institution that talks about avoiding keeping vacant lands? Like I have seen lands that are owned by people, but seems like they're keeping it empty. Because sometimes we've seen this, for example, in Egypt and somewhere, and I think this is the case in the housing as well. They're freezing the land, so it gets higher. But then if there is some housing demands in this neighborhood, is there any law regarding this?
Yeah. These instruments or tool that I mentioned, zona de expressão urbanística, that I translate areas of urbanistic pressure that basically are pressure of prices, housing prices and things like that, means that municipalities can delimitate these areas, can be all the municipality or certain areas, and say we are going to aggravate the fiscal that the owners have to pay for vacant lands and dwellings. Both, they can do that. They have the power to do that because, as you said, it's completely unacceptable that urbanization areas, infrastructure areas, land just still waiting for better prices and things like that. So they would have to, if they want to increase what they have to pay to the fiscal service, then they have to start the operation of construction or to put it to sell or something else. But yes, they can do that.
Yes, thank you. You also talked about social mix, Sonia, and we were a little bit astonished to see that the housing market is quite segmented. So we have social housing, affordable housing, and then there's the open market. But there doesn't seem to be a close relation between these segments. Are there any policies or is there any discussion on how to create more inclusive, socially mixed projects or neighborhoods?
Yeah, that is a very good question. So probably you realize also that you have agencies specialized in certain type of housing. Dom Social, it's specialized in social housing. And then you have these Sociedades of Urban Rehabilitation, Porto Vivo, specialize in accessible housing or affordable housing, sorry. But at the moment, I even would like to learn what you have, to know what you have learned there. It's very confusing because even for us, it's very confusing. Because traditionally you had what they call subsidized rent, renda apoiada. That would be some regime for social rent. And that regime would say municipalities should have the identification of families that need housing, that apply for social housing, and they should be classified according to needs. And you will have people in order of needs, which was not very smart, because then you will have you will allocate only very vulnerable people, creating stigmatization and not a good return to the agency. And then the government created the regime of affordable housing that is also very strange, that is based on market values, and that would be 20% below, and this affordable housing would be affordable housing definition would be used to give incentives for the market promoters that would accept to rent lower than the market with some benefits. But then, well, we don't know much about this. We don't know really what are the results of this policy. We know they are not very exciting. They created also something like a platform where online platform where tenants that need housing would go, and then you would have the landlords, if they would match with a maximum 30% of effort rate with the others, and the rent will be, then they will have some incentives. Means that the landlord would not have to pay to the state 25% of the value that they get from rents. They won't have to pay, and they will give a discount. But that didn't work very well. And now it's a big mess because we had this primeiro direito, first right, with the European Commission giving 100% funding for housing to be built, and allowing eligible for families until very high income for us. And I don't know what you learn in Domo Social, but some municipalities like Lisbon and in Everett, just to give an example, they decide not to use this regime based on classification and needs.
Sonia?
I stopped.
Yes.
They stopped using that classification, and they start giving the house for those who could pay for certain rents much higher. So it's like rents in the middle do you understand what I mean? So, but they are not really trying to do the quotas thing. You have to have 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. In new operations, you have to have social, you have to have affordable, and they are not doing that. They have, Dom Social has different clients with the exception of this Ilhas operation. They work for the middle class. They say clearly that is their mandate. It's to work for the middle class. And we don't see that. No, we don't see that. So let's see what will happen in the future. I think this is a legado of understanding housing not as a pillar of welfare state, like in Denmark. That is a pillar, like they built the health system or educational system for all, based on cost housing, and then with some possibilities, like the possibilities of housing authorities to put 25%. as emergency situation. Denmark kept this clearly ambition of building a strong, resilient housing system, not for profit, that we cannot sell, that is of all the people. And those who need, they will get housing allowance. But we are not using, like you in Germany, after 20 years, it can be changed the rent. No, it's forever. So this is a big difference. It's universalistic and retain this idea of rents going to a big fund that will give money to rehabilitation, and the rents are based on the cost of building, and then if you need to do works, then it will be based also on that of renovation, and it's very well preserved. I'm not talking about the bad things about, even though I know the bad things about the Danish case, I'm not talking about them. I refuse to talk about these exceptional measures of the ghetto list to change and privatize some areas. I'm aware of them, but I'm not talking about them because this is the bad exception. Most still is kept, like I said. And I want to believe that they will stop with it. I hope. But what I wanted to tell you, we had this legacy of, during Salazar regime, the first programs were for those who could pay, beautiful houses like those casas económicas, but they were, you visit, how to you visit that house, how to translate that house, you can even say it.
The ones that the neighborhood in Everheim?
Yes, exactly that. It's more like these outlets. Is it outlets the name of these? I cannot remember the model of that council housing with the. It's not based on. Oh, I'm sorry. What I want to say, it's casas económicas, what was not a cheap model, was for the middle class, for the judge, for the professor that would go to that houses, or sometimes from some not-for-profit that would. So it was built for those who could pay and could not find in the market solutions. Then we had the small houses, municipal houses, after 1947, influenced also by what's going on in Germany and other countries, that was built for the low-income people, working class that could not find. Then in the 90s, we had this model of the 70s was good, but didn't build so much. In the 90s, we had the model of get rid of informal settlements, build new large social housing estates, and rehouse the poor people. And I think this segmentation is the legacy of the past. And this is really a problem. It's a legacy of poor planning culture, and it's a legacy of segmented regimes of producing housing for this or for that, and building on segregation. Yes. I'm sorry, it's a bit late for me, and I cannot think by night. I'm very morning.
I would have a last question, I think, because I don't see any from the others. Oh, see you go. Okay, but two last questions from our side.
Okay,
no,
pleasure.
I think what I found really interesting in how you started also the presentation in like looking at the path dependency, and so like how things came about, and I think that explains why you have the gentrification that happens also with the golden visa and the need for getting investments. But so at the moment, it clearly is undesired, right? The scope in which the gentrification is happening is really becoming problematic, and people can no longer afford the housing. I know you asked us, but I would like to ask you back. So, like, what would you say Porto would need in terms of anti-gentrification measures?
Now we have to apply the good models that we've seen in other countries, and we have to apply all of that. The model that you've seen to begin, for example, with a certain inclusive requirements of you have to have this, you have to have this, it has to be public money has to subsidize permanent housing transformation. It's not for it has to be we cannot continue with this model even of allowing after 20 years to privatize housing. We don't have enough land to allow this growth model, and it's not even sustainable. I'm not sure if everybody understands that we should change the paradigm, honestly, in Portugal, because through responsibles and also the people who has been in the municipality, they justify the problem in the city center as a result of rent regulation. They justify of models that didn't work. And they think that when the market comes in, the problems are better. At least it's not totally derelict. That is the opinion of many people. That is the market will solve, and we don't have. They think that we don't have enough resources to do differently. Honestly, even in interviews, I was surprised how people that should know more about housing, they think that after 20 years to sell the house is good because needs rehabilitation, and that's a lot of work. That requires funding out, and how some policymakers have such a narrow understanding of what requires of a resilient housing sector that answers to this generation, the next generation, because the inequality that these models create is amazing. How we allowed tenants or cooperatives or this to get mais-valias plus value from selling something that was made with public money. This type of problem, it's really, I'm not sure if it will change, honestly.
Sigrid,
Yes,
question.
we talked about the role of the municipality and institutionalized institutional policies against the housing crisis. We also had a workshop on commoning last week where we tried to shift the lens a little bit and also discuss about bottom-up initiatives, cooperatives in the sense that shared capital or joint capital creates shared cooperative living conditions, a little bit different from the cooperative model, which is usually established in Portugal, but more like having really shared ownership. Do you see any examples for this or any pathways for empowering the local people to enter into these strategies against gentrification?
Well, I think the discussion here is about the actors. On the one hand, should we insist in public actors, or should we have not for profit, or should we have population, or should we have families mobilized, empowered families, communities? This is one thing. For example, in Denmark, we have not-for-profit housing associations. It worked really well. And they keep the stock in their possession and they can do more investments, works well. Also in Évora, we have seen some residual example of that came from a not-for-profit mutualist association, come from they had some small insurance, then they invested in some housing out there, and they kept that in their power. And they still have low and middle rents, and that is crucial for them to pay salaries, for example. That neighborhood that you saw allows some people to work in the association, in that not-for-profit association, and do things. On the other hand, we saw also Malagueira cooperative, a housing cooperative. And the guys who built the cooperative, because of the model that was used, they stopped having a job, simply. They were not managing anything. They cannot do more investments if there's no funding. The rental doesn't, the revenue from rents doesn't stay there. So it's a terrible model. I am completely pro cooperative movement of tenants. If it stays in some land trust, or call it whatever you want, the commons, that I think it's that. I don't know if I've answered to your question, but the problem, what we see sometimes, it's people who create cooperatives, sometimes they don't have enough money to go for the next round investment, or they stop even trusting, or there are divorce in the middle, or there are some, it's not very much institutionalized situations sometimes. That's the example I've seen. And then you have these housing cooperatives that work more like promoters, normal promoters, using the cooperatives to have some discounts. But then they were selling very luxury things. You have a bit of everything. I don't know, really. Some people believe the power also of involving the private sector and limiting what the private sector can do, securing something for the community. I think it's also public-private partnership that's different model. For example, the previous mayor for housing in Lisbon, she has a lot of experience now. She's talking about it. Helena Roseta, she's talking about that. Because we have 2% of social housing. They are not our local authorities. Not all local authorities have the power, like in Dom Social and the knowledge, in other small municipalities. But also they have the power of planning, of say yes or no to permits, limiting conditions. We have now legal institutions. When I say legal institution, I'm talking about, in the law, it says that the Assembleia Municipal can say we only give permits if they give certain percentage to social housing. Just to give an example, what is the name of these in areas of what they call housing crisis? They say this is an housing crisis, and we can limit it, private developments to certain conditions, these kind of things. But we can give them more. We can give bonus. We can say you don't pay these taxes. You go first, and others. There's a lot of things that can be done, and you can see that already in if you go and see documents like I've seen some years ago in London. Mayor for London, he has all of that in his strategy for the London metropolitan area. They have to give a certain percentage, then they go they have a green light to go faster than others, blah, blah, blah. These are good examples that we could use.
Also Brazil, I think. No?
Sorry?
Brazil, I think, has a lot of that as well.
I never been in Brazil, if you believe that.
Me neither. Good. I just realized that Anna Azevedo from Gayurp is also with us. Anna, I don't know if you want to just say hello, or if you have any thoughts on what Sonia just presented and like how things are going in Gaia. If there's anything you would like to add on or to just comment on from your side. You're on mute at the moment. Anna, you have to unmute your microphone.
Sorry.
Yes.
I am on the Metropolitan. I'm going home and I'm listening, and I can talk too much. I just want to desculpa. Era já sabem as ideias, mas não consigo falar mais. Desculpem. Mas se não tiverem algo a perguntar, mandem-me pelo WhatsApp que eu depois respondo. Mas adorei a Sara, adorei o modelo das casas livres, já estou a pensar, depois até de certo falo contigo, adorei tudo. Sorry guys, but I'm tired in the metro and I can't speak more English. Big kiss for help, Thank you.
Great. Thank you,
know,
Anna.
Anna, you
Good to
can
see you.
always speak in Portuguese because else it's a wonderful translator. I'm
Although
always
with
counting
the
on her.
connection, it was a bit complicated, but I think yes. And are you still talking to us?
Oh, sorry. Is our is our strength leader in the University of Stuttgart to translate these conversations.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think also we will close off here. Thank you so much, Sonia, for your lecture, and we might still be in touch if we have more questions afterwards, because we have recorded the whole session. So
thank you very much. Very kind of you.
Yes.
Having
So
me
nice
here.
to see you again. All the best. Thank you.
Sónia, desculpa, podes partilhar o PowerPoint? Não.
Also, yes, I can. I can share. I have sent it to Els, and I'm happy to share the PowerPoint.
Yes.
Just drop me an email in case you don't have it. Envia-me um email.
Yes, I can share. All right. Okay. Bye, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Bye-bye.